And as we approach this great book of Revelation, just listen to this dialogue overheard recently in China between a well-known house church pastor and a visiting preacher from the United States. It might help us to understand and apply the great visions in this perplexing and astonishing book. The American pastor said, "Well, what book of the Bible is most precious to you?" The Chinese pastor replied, "Well, probably the book of Revelation, because," and then the American pastor broke in and says, "because your suffering makes you long for the end of the world, and you're strengthened by the vision of love of how it will end with Christ's victory, right?" Chinese pastor smiled and he said, "Well, that too, but we don't just take Revelation to be a description of the way the world will end. We see it also as a description of the way the world is now." The American pastor looked a little puzzled. "I'm not understanding you. Surely Revelation is the book that tells us how the world will end." Chinese pastor said, "I'm telling you that it's also a description of the way the world is now. Suffering has made this clear to us in China. Clearly, prosperity has hidden this from you, where you come from. You see, we had a Caesar here in China called Mao Zedong, and he, like the Caesar of the early church period, demanded what was not only his, but God's. Like in Revelation, he used a beast to coerce us, communism, a false prophet to beguile us, false bishops, and when we resisted this idolatry with the testimony of the Lamb, we were slaughtered and jailed. So in this way, we saw that Revelation is a description of the spiritual war that always goes on in any society, including yours." The American pastor said, "But it's not going on in America today. You say we have that hidden from us. What do you mean?" So the Chinese pastor said, "Well, this conflict is obvious to us in China because you couldn't miss that Mao was setting himself up as an idol and demanding worship. So the veil was removed. We saw the world as it really is, a place where idols demand worship. But it's not obvious to those in the West because it takes a more subtle form." And then the American pastor said, "Perhaps it's not happening at all this way. I live in a Christian country." The Chinese pastor said, "But I tell you, there are beasts or idols in your society, just as much as in ours, and even in your churches. And there are false prophets telling you that this idolatry might even be biblical, and beasts are coercing you. Your beast may not be a person, but an idea." In our fellowship, we had a clever young man who lived with an American family for a while he was studying. The couple were very generous, but he noticed something about them. They were always exhausted. Both worked incredibly hard, though they had plenty of money. 3 cars, 2 homes, expensive club memberships, and as far as he could tell, gave only the minimum to the Lord's work. They never asked him a single question about the Chinese church. And when he left, they gave him an envelope with $20 in it. And he said, "I felt very sorry for them. They thought they were free, but they were slaves. They were dropping from exhaustion because they felt they had to pursue a lifestyle in order to feel good about themselves. But they never knew that the pursuit of that life had stolen their hearts away from Christ." Do you see what I mean? Persecution is a way of forcing us to bow down to God. But to those who do not have the light of persecution, they don't even see that they're bowing down. That's why we need to listen to the persecuted church. We can give you an insight that will enable you to see the world through apocalyptic eyes and become one of the persecuted yourselves, which is your destiny, because Christians are people who are called to resist idols. The American pastor thought about this and he said, if what you say is true, then consumerism could be a more effective killer of the faith than communism. The Chinese pastor agreed. You're right. This is what we are afraid of here. Consumerism clutters up life so much that we fail to see the world as it is, full of idols trying to steal our worship from God. We can help you but you must pray for us also. This is how a book like Revelation works. It's not only about how the world will end, it's how the world is underneath.